There is a truth that most people are not willing to face. Not because it is complicated, not because it requires a degree or a special talent, but because it requires something far more demanding than intelligence. It requires a decision made not once, on a good morning when everything feels possible, but made again and again in the quiet moments when no one is watching, when the results have not yet arrived, when doubt is louder than faith. That decision is the choice to think differently, to see your life not as it is, but as it can become. And I want to talk to you today about that choice, about the extraordinary power of a mind that chooses to focus on possibility, and about why that single shift in thinking, practiced consistently over time, does not just make you feel better. It creates lasting success. Now, understand something important. I am not talking about wishful thinking. I am not talking about closing your eyes and imagining a better life while refusing to do the work. That is not positive thinking. That is positive dreaming. And the world is full of dreamers who are still waiting for their ship to come in without ever having sent one out. What I am talking about is something far more disciplined, far more intentional than that. I am talking about training your mind to look for what is possible when everything around you insists on showing you what is impossible. I am talking about the daily, deliberate practice of directing your thoughts toward growth, toward solutions, toward the next right action, even when, especially when, circumstances argue against it. Let me tell you something. The mind is the most powerful instrument you will ever own, more powerful than any technology, more valuable than any asset on any balance sheet. And most people never learn to use it with intention. They let it run like an old car with no steering, wherever the road slopes, wherever fear pushes it, wherever old habits and old conversations and old limitations point it. They wonder why they end up in the same place year after year, circling the same problems, repeating the same frustrations, and they blame the economy, they blame their upbringing, they blame their circumstances. But the honest truth, the truth that separates the people who build something meaningful with their lives from the people who do not is this. Your outer world is always, always a reflection of your inner world. The quality of your thinking determines the quality of your life. Let that sink in. The major value in life is not what you get. The major value in life is what you become. Read that again slowly, because everything I want to say to you in this conversation rests on that foundation. What you become is determined, not by luck, not by the family you were born into, not by the city you live in or the economy you inherited. What you become is determined by the habitual quality of your thoughts, by what you choose to focus on every single day, by the story you tell yourself about who you are and what is possible for you. That story, more than any external factor, is writing the script of your future. The question is whether you are writing it with intention or letting it be written by default. Think about a lens held up to sunlight, an ordinary piece of glass, nothing remarkable on its own. But angle it correctly, hold it steady, focus it on a single point, and it can set fire to dry leaves in a matter of moments. The same sunlight that warms your skin without effect becomes, when focused, a force capable of igniting something. That is what positive directed thinking does to your potential. Your potential has always been there, just like the sun. The question has never been whether you have enough raw material. The question has always been whether you have learned to focus it. Most people scatter their mental energy in a dozen directions at once. A little worry here, a little complaint there, a little fantasy here, a little resentment there, and they wonder why nothing ever catches fire. Nothing catches fire because nothing was ever truly focused. Now ask yourself honestly, what do you spend most of your mental energy on every day? Not what you intend to think about, not what you wish you focused on, but what your mind actually returns to, hour after hour, in the quiet moments between tasks. If your honest answer is problems, complaints, fears, and all the reasons why something will not work, then you are not steering your life. You are drifting. And drifting, no matter how talented you are, no matter how much potential is waiting inside you, drifting never leads to a destination worth arriving at. If you really want to do something, you will find a way. If you do not, you will find an excuse. That sentence should be posted somewhere you can see it every single day. Not as a rebuke, but as a mirror. Because every one of us has been on both sides of that line. We have all wanted something badly enough to find a way. And we have all wanted something just enough to find an excuse that felt reasonable. The difference between the two was never the difficulty of the goal. The difference was always the quality of the thinking we brought to it. When you think like someone who is determined to find a way, your mind goes to work searching for solutions, angles, possibilities. When you think like someone who is already looking for permission to quit, your mind obliges you just as faithfully and finds every reason the thing cannot be done. Here is what most people do not understand about positive thinking. It is not a passive state. It is not a feeling that floats in when circumstances are favorable. It is an active discipline. Practice the way a musician practices scales, the way an athlete trains at 5 a.m. before the stadium is open, before the crowd arrives, before anyone is there to applaud. The musician does not feel like running scales every day. The athlete does not always feel like lacing up at dawn. But they do it anyway because they understand that the performance depends not on whether you feel inspired, but on whether you have prepared. Positive thinking works the same way. You build it. You practice it. You choose it over and over until it becomes the architecture of your mind, the default setting of the most powerful instrument you own. Let me tell you something powerful. Think about a farmer preparing his fields in the early spring. The ground is cold. There is no visible evidence yet of anything growing. To a person who does not understand farming, the field looks like nothing. Empty dirt. But the farmer does not look at that field and say, there is nothing here. The farmer looks at that field and sees the harvest. He sees it clearly enough to invest his time, his energy, his seed, his labor into soil that gives him back nothing for months. He acts from a picture in his mind, a picture of what will be, not what is. That is not wishful thinking. That is cultivated expectation backed by disciplined action. And that is exactly what positive, success-oriented thinking looks like in practice. You hold the image of what you are building clearly enough that you are willing to do the work in the seasons when there is no visible harvest. You trust the process because you understand it. Now think about this. The people around you, the ones who have built something they are proud of, the ones who seem to carry a kind of quiet confidence in difficult moments, they are not immune to hardship. They face the same setbacks, the same disappointments, the same unexpected obstacles that everyone else faces. The difference is not that their circumstances are kinder. The difference is that they have trained their minds to ask a different question when something goes wrong. Not why is this happening to me, but what can I do about this? Not why am I so unlucky, but what is the next right move? That shift from victim thinking to architect thinking, from complaint to solution, is the entire game. And it is available to every single person who chooses it. It is available to you right now in whatever situation you find yourself in. Discipline is the bridge between goals and accomplishment. You have heard that before. But let me connect it to this conversation in a way that matters. Most people understand discipline in terms of behavior. Getting up early, going to the gym, doing the work when you do not feel like it. And yes, all of that is real discipline. But the discipline that makes all other disciplines possible is the discipline of the mind. The discipline to refuse certain thoughts. The discipline to redirect your focus when it wanders into territory that weakens you. The discipline to choose. Every morning before the world gets loud, to think like the person you are becoming rather than like the person you used to be. That is the bridge. And without it, every other bridge you try to build will wash away when the first difficulty arrives. Imagine for a moment a ship sailing across an ocean. The ship has a destination. The navigator has plotted a course. Now, that ship will spend the majority of its journey slightly off course. Winds shift. Currents push. Weather intervenes. Every few hours, small corrections are made, tiny adjustments to the rudder, and the ship continues toward its destination. If the navigator stopped making corrections, stopped paying attention, stopped actively steering, the ship would drift. And a ship that drifts far enough and long enough in an open ocean does not end up at the wrong port. It does not end up anywhere at all. Your mind is that ship. Your thinking is the rudder. And positive directed thinking is the act of making constant, deliberate corrections, pulling yourself back toward what is possible when fear or discouragement or circumstance has pushed you slightly off course. You make the correction, then you make it again, then you make it again. That is how you arrive. Let me ask you a question. When was the last time you sat quietly, without distraction, without a phone or a screen or a conversation pulling at your attention, and thought deliberately about your own life? Not worried about it, not reviewed everything going wrong with it, but thought about it with genuine intention. Who do you want to become? What do you want to build? What kind of person do you need to be on the inside in order to create the life you want on the outside? Most people never do this. They move through their days, reacting, responding, managing the immediate, and they are surprised, genuinely surprised, when 5 years pass and they find themselves in almost exactly the same place they were standing when those 5 years began. Time does not stand still because you forgot to make decisions. Life advances. The question is whether you are advancing it deliberately or whether it is simply happening to you. We must all suffer one of two things: the pain of discipline or the pain of regret. Think about those two pains carefully because they are not equal. The pain of discipline is sharp and immediate. It lives in the morning when you would rather stay in bed. It lives in the moment when you would rather complain than solve, rather avoid than confront, rather drift than steer. It is the discomfort of choosing the harder thing in the smaller moment, but it is short. It passes, and it leaves something behind, something that grows and compounds over time. The pain of regret is different. It is slow and quiet. It creeps in, not in the morning, but late at night. It arrives not when you are uncomfortable, but when you are still. And it does not pass the way discomfort passes. It accumulates. It deepens. It becomes the companion of every person who chose, over and over, the easier path in the small moments, and then arrived at a future they did not choose. You will suffer one of these two pains. The only control you have is which one. Now, here is where positive thinking connects directly to that choice. Because the person who has trained their mind to think about what is possible, to see difficulty as temporary and progress as inevitable, to focus on what they can control and release what they cannot, that person finds the pain of discipline far more manageable. Not because they feel no discomfort, but because they can see past it. They can see the harvest on the other side of the empty field. They can see the destination on the other side of the corrected course. They hold that picture clearly enough that the discomfort of the present moment does not convince them to abandon the future. That is the practical power of positive thinking. It does not remove obstacles. It gives you the clarity and the resolve to walk through them. Success is nothing more than a few simple disciplines practiced every day. Now read that slowly. A few simple disciplines, not 100 complicated strategies, not a radical transformation overnight. A few simple disciplines practiced every day. And one of those disciplines, the one that makes all others sustainable, is the discipline of choosing how you think. What you allow into your mind in the first hour of the morning. What you do with the thought that tells you it is too late, you have missed your window, you are not the kind of person who succeeds at this. Do you give that thought a seat at your table, or do you recognize it for what it is, a habit, an echo of old limitation, a voice that belongs to an older version of you that you are actively in the process of outgrowing? You get to make that choice. You make it every single day. And every single time you make it in the direction of possibility and discipline and action, you are building the bridge, one plank at a time. Let me tell you something. Think about the roots of a large tree. You cannot see them. They are underground, invisible, doing their work in the dark, where no one applauds them, where no one can even observe what is happening. But when a storm arrives, when the wind is strong and the ground shakes, you see the result of all that invisible work. The tree stands, not because it is lucky, not because the storm chose to spare it, but because the roots went deep, deeper than the storm could reach. Most people want the visible part. They want the leaves and the branches and the height. They want the results that others can see and admire. But they resist the invisible work, the early mornings, the decisions made when no one is watching, the commitment to building the roots of character and thinking and discipline that no one can see but that everything else depends on. Positive thinking is root work. It is not glamorous. It does not always feel like progress, but it is what holds you when the storm arrives, and the storm always arrives. Now ask yourself honestly, when something goes wrong in your life, when a plan falls apart or a relationship disappoints or a goal you were working toward slips further away, what is your first instinct? Do you reach for explanation or for action? Do you reach for someone to blame or for something you can do? Do you reach for the story of why this is someone else's fault or for the question of what you can still control? The answer to those questions tells you more about where your life is headed than any other single indicator. Because the mind that reaches for responsibility, for possibility, for the next right move, even in the middle of disappointment, that mind is doing something remarkable. It is refusing to be defined by what happened. It is insisting on being defined by what it does next. And that insistence, practiced enough times in enough difficult moments, becomes character. And character, not luck, is the foundation of lasting success. Affirmation without discipline is the beginning of delusion. Let me tell you why that matters in this conversation. There is a version of positive thinking that does real damage. It is the version that tells you feeling good about a goal is the same thing as pursuing it. That visualizing success is a substitute for the work that creates it. That the right attitude, in the absence of consistent action, will somehow attract the results you want. That is not positive thinking. That is positive pretending. And I want to make the distinction clearly, because real positive thinking, the kind that builds real success, is always accompanied by discipline and action. The mindset is the engine, but an engine without a road to drive on produces nothing. Your positive thinking must be connected at every point to the daily choices you make, the habits you build, the discomfort you choose to walk through rather than around. Picture a pilot preparing for a long flight. Before that plane leaves the ground, the pilot has checked the instruments, filed the flight plan, reviewed the weather, confirmed the fuel, run through every checklist twice. The pilot is not leaving anything to optimism alone. The preparation is thorough and deliberate and disciplined. But that same pilot in the air, when turbulence hits, when visibility drops, when the unexpected intervenes, leans on something that all the checklists in the world cannot fully provide. He leans on the trained confidence that says, I have handled difficulty before. I know what I know, and I will find my way through this. That is positive thinking in its real form. Grounded in preparation, tested by experience, unshaken by turbulence, and expressed not in words but in the steadiness of the hands on the controls. You cannot change your destination overnight, but you can change your direction overnight. That is the promise. Not that everything will be different tomorrow. Not that the work is less than it is. Not that the distance between where you are and where you want to be is not real. It is real. But direction is something you can choose right now in this moment, regardless of what has come before. And that change of direction, held consistently over days and weeks and months and years, will take you somewhere dramatically different from where drifting would have taken you. The ship that corrects its course by 2 degrees arrives at an entirely different shore than the ship that drifts uncorrected. That is the mathematics of deliberate thinking. Small, consistent redirections of the mind, practiced every day, compound into a life that looks, from the outside, like something remarkable. Let me ask you a question you need to answer honestly. Not for me, for yourself. Is the thinking you are doing today consistent with the life you say you want? Not sometimes, not when you feel motivated. On the average Tuesday, when there is nothing exciting happening, when the results are not visible yet, when the discipline is harder than the dream, is your thinking pointed toward where you are going or toward where you have been? Because that ordinary Tuesday, that unremarkable Wednesday, that quiet Friday morning when no one is cheering for you, that is where your future is actually being built. Not in the peak moments, not in the inspired hours. In the ordinary hours, the invisible hours, the hours when every thought you choose is a vote for the person you are becoming or for the person you used to be. Work harder on yourself than you do on your job. Most people invert that. They give the best of their energy to the thing that pays them and the leftovers to the thing that shapes them. They spend 8 hours serving someone else's vision and 20 minutes, if that, working on their own thinking, their own growth, their own character. And then they wonder why their external results never seem to outpace their inner development. They cannot. They never will. Your outer world will not grow beyond your inner world for long. The universe is very efficient about this. Whatever gap you create between what you have built externally and who you are internally, life will find a way to close it. Sometimes gently, sometimes not. The only sustainable path is to grow yourself first, deliberately and consistently, and let your outer results be a natural expression of that inner growth. Let me tell you something that can change the way you see every single day. Think about water flowing over rock. One pass of water over stone does nothing visible. The stone looks exactly the same. 100 passes, still nothing you can see with the naked eye. But thousands of passes, year after year, decade after decade, and the stone is carved. Canyons are formed by water that refused to stop, not by water that hit the rock once very hard. By water that came back and came back and came back consistently, persistently, in season and out of season, never discouraged by the absence of visible result. That is what consistent positive thinking does to the obstacles in your life. It does not move them in a single moment. It shapes them over time. It finds the channels where progress is possible. It creates through persistence alone what force alone could never accomplish. And the only question is whether you are willing to be the water, whether you are willing to come back tomorrow when today showed you no visible result, whether you are willing to trust the process long enough to see the canyon. Don't wish it were easier, wish you were better. Think about the significance of that for a moment, because most people spend their energy wishing for easier circumstances, a better market, a more supportive environment, fewer obstacles, less competition, more time, more resources, a better starting point. And even if you got all of those things, even if every external condition became more favorable overnight, you would still be you, with the same patterns of thinking, the same habits, the same level of discipline, the same quality of focus. The easier circumstances would give temporary relief, but no lasting result, because the internal architecture that creates results would be unchanged. The only wish worth making is the wish to become someone better, more capable, more disciplined, more focused, more resilient, more intentional about how you think and what you do with every day you are given. Because that kind of becoming cannot be taken away by a bad market or a failed plan or an unexpected setback. It lives in you, and wherever you go, it comes with you. Success is something you attract by the person you become. Read that again. Not something you chase, not something you grab, something you attract. The way a magnet attracts metal, not by running after it, but by becoming something that metal is drawn to. Most people spend their entire lives chasing success as if it is hiding somewhere out there in the right opportunity, the right connection, the right timing, the right break, and they exhaust themselves in the pursuit without ever stopping to ask the most important question, who am I becoming while I am chasing this? Because success, real success, the kind that lasts, is not an event. It is not a transaction. It is the natural result of becoming someone whose thinking, whose habits, whose character, and whose daily disciplines have made them the kind of person that success is naturally drawn to. Think about this. Two people start in exactly the same place. Same city, same resources, same starting conditions. One of them spends the next 10 years cultivating their mind, investing in how they think, choosing disciplines over excuses, turning setbacks into lessons, practicing positive, directed thinking every single day. Not because every day is easy, but because they have decided that the direction of their thoughts is the one thing they will never give up control of. The other person spends those same 10 years reacting, drifting, waiting for circumstances to improve before they commit to changing, telling themselves they will get serious when things get easier, when the timing is better, when life gives them a clearer sign. 10 years later, the first person is somewhere genuinely different. Not because they were lucky, not because life went easier on them, but because the compound interest of 10 years of deliberate thinking, 10 years of choosing growth over comfort, creates something that cannot be replicated any other way. 10 years of the right thinking, practiced every day, is worth more than any single stroke of fortune. Now understand something important. I am not telling you that this is easy. I am telling you that it is simple. Those are very different things. It is simple to decide, every morning, to think about what is possible rather than what is not. It is simple to ask a better question when something goes wrong. It is simple to direct your focus toward the next right action rather than toward all the reasons action feels impossible. Simple, but not easy. Because everything in the world, your habits, your fears, your old stories, the opinions of people who have stopped dreaming for themselves, all of it will push against you. The easy thing always is to drift. The easy thing is to let the current take you. The hard thing, the simple but hard thing, is to steer. And everything depends on whether you are willing to steer. Motivation is what gets you started. Habit is what keeps you going. And this is where positive thinking makes its final and most important argument, because motivation is unreliable. It comes in waves. Some mornings you wake up with fire, ready to work, ready to build, ready to take on everything that is standing between you and the life you want. And other mornings, the fire is not there. The energy is low, the results feel far away, and the gap between where you are and where you want to be feels wider than it did yesterday. If your positive thinking depends on feeling motivated, it will fail you precisely when you need it most. But if you have built it into a habit, if you have practiced it so consistently that it has become the default posture of your mind, then on the difficult mornings it does not need to be summoned. It is already there. It is the groove your mind falls into naturally because you wore it deep enough through practice that it became the path of least resistance. That is the destination, not a life without difficulty, not a permanent state of inspiration, but a mind so practiced in the direction of possibility, solution, growth, and disciplined action that when the hard days come, and they will come, you do not have to choose your thinking with great effort. It is already chosen. You are already pointed in the right direction. You are already the water that keeps flowing over the rock regardless of what the rock says about it. You are already the farmer who sees the harvest in the empty field. You are already the pilot with steady hands. You are already the tree with roots that go deeper than the storm. Now let me bring this to where it matters most, to the only place it has ever mattered, which is today. Not 10 years from now. Not the version of you that will exist when circumstances improve. Today, the person you are in this hour, making the choices available to you in this hour. Because this is the only place where the future is ever actually built. Not in the imagination, not in the plan, not in the resolution, but in the small, concrete, daily choice about what you let your mind do, what you direct your attention toward, what story you tell yourself about who you are and what is still possible for you. Don't spend major time on minor things. Most of the thoughts that your mind defaults to without your guidance are minor things. Complaints about what cannot be changed, worries about what has not happened, replays of old mistakes, inventory of other people's shortcomings. All of it consuming the most valuable resource you have, which is not money, not time, but focused mental energy. Every minute your mind spends in that territory is a minute it is not spending building something. Every thought pointed backward is a thought not pointed forward. And you only have so many thoughts in a day. You only have so much capacity for directed, intentional focus before fatigue sets in. The question is what you spend it on. The question is whether the way you use your mental energy is consistent with the life you claim to want. Success is not the result of thinking positively once when you were desperate enough. It is not the result of a weekend of inspiration that fades by Wednesday. It is not the result of a good intention held loosely. It is the result of a decision made deeply and renewed daily to be deliberate about the one thing no one can ever take from you, which is the direction of your own thinking. It is the result of understanding that what happens inside your mind is not just reaction and weather and accident. It is, or it can be if you choose it, a practiced and disciplined art. And the canvas of that art is your life. The work that is done in the mind becomes, given enough time and enough consistency, the work that is done in the world. The major value in life is not what you get. The major value in life is what you become. And what you become is decided day after day in the quiet, invisible work of directing your thoughts with intention, not waiting for inspiration to arrive, not waiting for circumstances to align, not waiting for permission from a world that will not give it, deciding now, thinking now, building now, from wherever you are, with whatever you have, starting today and not stopping. You have been given the most extraordinary instrument in the known universe. A mind capable of imagining what does not yet exist and then building toward it with discipline and focus and relentless positive expectation. The only question left is whether you will use it with the intention it deserves. Whether you will be the farmer, the pilot, the water, the tree with roots no storm can reach. Whether you will close the gap day by day, thought by thought, choice by choice between the person you are and the person you are fully capable of becoming. That work begins now, not tomorrow, not when conditions improve, now. In the next thought you choose. In the next moment, you redirect your focus toward what is possible. In the decision, made quietly and powerfully today, to think like someone who is building something, who is growing, who is becoming, who refuses to let the size of the obstacle determine the direction of the mind. That is the discipline. That is the practice. That is the bridge. Build it one deliberate thought at a time and do not stop until the life you have imagined becomes the life you are living.